Greetings, interwebs! Welcome to another fantabulous, fun-filled episode of the Comic Watchers Show. He's Mike, I'm Matt, and we're here this week with, drum roll please, Sean Winningham of the Captioned Life Podcast, which is a way more slickly produced podcast than ours and way more successful because people are listening to it. And my God, it's now part of the Comic Watch family, so it is shameless plug time for the Captioned Life. Sean, how the hell are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on and for having the show on under the Comic Watch family. I'm really excited about that.
Absolutely. Obviously you yourself a contributor to Comic Watch for a little while now, and it feels like you've been here forever. It just seemed like a natural progression for us to have your show and our site all under the same umbrella. So it's branding at its best. But don't let me be your hype man much longer, because as Mike will tell you, I get to blathering sometimes.
No.
Tell folks about the Captioned Life and why they should be listening to it.
Yeah, so the Caption Life has been around for a few years now, and we actually just went through a little bit of a restructuring because when we first started 3 years ago, it was me and, oddly enough, two other guys that actually just met on Twitter. I never met them in person or anything, and we were just like, why don't we just start a podcast? And so that's how we started. And then about 2 years ago, one of the hosts had to step away from the show, and so the past year is me and my good buddy Kevin has been co-hosting for the show, and we were doing it for about I think a year, maybe a year and a half, where we were doing every other week we would try to release an episode. And basically it's focused on the comics world and just anything that's related to that or pop culture. But Kevin had to kind of step away as well too, just because he has a lot of commitments to his job. He's a very busy person during the school year. He's in the education field, but he's not just a teacher. He's also, I say just a teacher. Teachers do a lot of stuff. I used to be a teacher myself. But he not only teaches, but he does a lot of the audiovisual stuff for his school. So he does like a lot of after school programming and videotaping and things like that. So he's very busy with school, and he has two kids who have grown up and they're starting to get really active in sports and activities and everything. So
do it.
yeah. So we have a discussion and talked about what we want to do for the future show. And so we decided to switch it up a little bit to where I would run it and then he would come and be a guest host whenever his schedule allows. So he'll still show up on the show from time to time and we'll still be on it. It's just that it used to be he was kind of like the lead co-host and kind of do everything and in terms of the episodes. And so now I'm running that as well. But the way I kind of explain the show to people is that we wanted this to be a platform for everybody, no matter where they're at in their journey through comics, whether you're, a very dedicated fan that you've been, doing it since you're a kid, or maybe you're revisiting comics after taking hiatus for a long time, which is basically my journey.
What you did. Yeah,
exactly. Or maybe you're just getting into it. You just don't have any idea about it. The whole idea is to try to have something for everyone on that walk of life. And so on the shows before we did this rebranding, we've had a lot of people who have either written or created comics, people who's been in the comics industry, educators who have used comics either in the classroom or we've had a college faculty professor who has written a book about the impact of comics on society, people who've written web comics, cosplayers. One of my favorite cosplayers that we've had on the show was Jonathan Bell, who's the Seattle Superman. He's actually inspired me to do cosplaying. I never thought about doing that before. Yeah. And his story is really cool. It's really neat to kind of see his journey and everything. But he's after we interviewed him, I just kind of got that cosplay bug, and so I always attribute that to him. And so that's what we've been doing, and I'm hoping to continue to do that. But now with the restructuring and everything, we're going to be doing the podcast every week. It's on most, if not all, of the podcast directories that are out there, and we also put it on YouTube. But we're going to do it every week, and we're going to have a guest every week for the show, whether it's somebody, again, that's in the comics industry that's writing a comic or has, just released something, or, people who are fans of whatever that kind of fits that genre. So we're going to have somebody on the show next week. Actually, we're going to talk about the D23 announcements that are going to come out. And so the person I have on the show is somebody that's a huge Disney and Marvel fan. And so we're going to get, just a wide gamut of people on the show to either tell us what their experience has been with comics, whether they're directly involved in the industry or just how comics has been a big part of their life. And, they're just passionate fans about that fandom as well, too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to be doing that every week, and we're going to, it's funny because when I started planning this out, I was worried that I was going to get enough people or enough ideas to fill out the rest of the year, week by week. But like one afternoon, it was a Saturday afternoon, I was going through it and kind of scheduled things out. I was like, holy crap, I got the whole year filled out already. So,
I was super impressed when you mentioned that you were booked up through like November. Like,
yeah,
Michael,
now through December
we're flying by the seat of our pants over here most of the time. Like, we're doing good to have somebody booked out in 3 weeks.
But it keeps the blood fresh.
It does. It does, and it keeps us on our toes because that's just who we are, I guess.
Right.
But so if somebody wanted to like go back and re-listen to some episodes of the Captioned Life, who are some of the like industry professionals and creative talent from that side of the house that you've gotten to talk with?
Yeah, so we've talked to Brian Hill on the show. And that was really early on.
He's knowledgeable.
Yes.
We had him a long time ago, Mike. I think it was before you were on.
For Brian Hill, yeah.
And I think he just had like Batman the Outsiders just came out or something like that. So we talked to him about the comic side, but we also talked about his work in the entertainment industry as well, too. We've had Sweeney Boo on the show, which she at that time she was a pretty well-known artist, but it was before she's kind of blown up now to where she has a huge following and is just doing a lot of stuff for a lot of different publishers. But this was around the time when her book Eat and Love Yourself had just came out. It was a really good book. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So she was really great on the show. We've had David Peppas, who at that time, Scouts Honors just came out, and we're going to try to get him to come on the show to talk about Savage Avengers in a few weeks as well, too. So
we'll ask him how he feels about Marvel's policy towards letting him talk about Marvel books, because I was like, hey, buddy, why don't you come on our show and talk about Savage Avengers? And he's all, well, I'm brand new to Marvel and I don't want to ruffle feathers by not getting permission to do this. So, brother, you're good, but he's not gonna listen to me. But so the next time we do have him on, I'm gonna give him a hard time.
Remember when you were on our show before you were making the big Marvel movie? You should start with that one there, Matt.
Right. Totes. Yeah. You were that Action Lab guy.
Yeah.
With the off-color Calvin and Hobbes homage.
So we've had them. We've had Heather Antos come on the show, and she talks about her experience being an editor. And then we've had some smaller self-publishers as well too. So just this week we dropped the episode with Danny Quick, who has created his own comic called Ace Blade. And that was a lot of fun because not only, does he have his own comic, but he has his own like studio where, they create the comic and a store that goes with it. And then he dabbled into creating an escape room that's based on his comic as well too. So
what?
Yeah. And I asked him on the show, I was like, have you ever like done an escape room before or anything? He's like, I went into it not knowing anything about it. And he learned a lot of hard lessons, but he had a lot of fun. And they just opened up, I think recently with the escape room, but it was a lot of fun talking to him about that. We've also had some smaller publishers. For example, we had Molly Farnsley, who created her own web comic, and it's not through Webtoons, but I think it's some other platform, but she created her own. And then we had Dwight McPherson from his publishing company is escaping my mind right now, but they do a lot of like small they're a small business. They publish their
Mhm.
own comics and they write their own comics and things like that. I'm gonna have to look it up. It's been a while since I've mentioned his company. I can't remember. I can see on my brain, but it's escaping me right now, so I have to look it up. But we've had, anywhere from like, people who worked in the big industries to the people who are doing self-publishing and smaller comics as well too. So
That's what's up. And I love having that variety because uh although you've definitely branched into the cosplay thing, which Mike, I don't think we ever have we?
No,
Not unless it's something I'm just utterly blanking on, but being able to touch on all of these different areas of fandom is such, and I hope you agree with this. I'm sure you will. That is such a great way to connect all of these disparate corners together in our singular love of just simply being fans, right?
yes.
Like, and this has kind of been our motto since Comic Watch's inception, not just the podcast, but the website, was giving back to the community that's given us so much. That's it right there. And I mean, getting to do the podcasts and doing a interview with Steve Orlando or whomever. I mean, it's like icing on the cake. And I mean, in a perfect world, I'd be getting paid to do this, but
Right.
I'll happily do it for free because, again, comics as a medium has given me, like so many others, just such a wonderful just outlet and for themselves to find themselves in, and hours of entertainment and all that good stuff. So it's awesome. So Sean, like, all right, you got to tell us, because we've definitely had a few fun screw ups while live stream. But what's your favorite screw up while you were live and recording with peeps?
Favorite screw up.
Oh
My
yeah.
gosh. That is a good,
no pressure.
No.
All the
Well,
pressure.
and I will say, my favorite screw up is actually, and this sounds like a cop out, but it really isn't. It was just a really funny moment. But my favorite screw up wasn't actually me that screwed up, but it was a guest we had on the show. So I mentioned her earlier, Molly Farnsley. The way that we had got in touch with her was when we first started the podcast. We were looking for people that would want to come on the show and kind of talk about, comics and everything. So I was part of a group called, and I think it was in the app Meetup, but it was like Indiana Comics. And I just posted something in that group and said, is anybody write their own comics or draw their own comics that want to come on the show? And she had mentioned that she would like to come on the show because she has her own. And so it took about a year to get her on the show, because when we first started, we didn't really have a plan. We just said, let's just put out episodes whenever we can. And so I think like the first 15 or 20 episodes, it wasn't consistent at all. Like we did one episode 1 month, and then, another month went by, and then we did 3 episodes like in the span of, 6 weeks or whatever. And so it was very sporadic, but we finally got her on the show. And then when we were talking to her, we were just talking about like her art style and everything. And she was telling us how she didn't really start drawing until in her very, very early 20s. And I was telling her, oh, I'm very impressed by that, because, drawing was something that I've always wished I could do, but I don't have the talent for it. And I just, can't draw, a stick figure to save my life. And she's like, oh, they'll say that your art is really good, and I remember thinking like, oh, like maybe she's just kind of being nice about, just in general and everything. So later on in the show, we were talking about drawing again, and then she brought up, she's like, I have seen your work. You do some really great stuff. And so in my mind, I'm like, I don't think she realizes that I'm not the person she's thinking of. And so after the show,
that's pretty great.
I know. So after the show, I asked her, I was like, now you have mentioned that you like my work. Like, are you talking about my video work that I've created? She's like, no, your art. I was like, Molly, I don't do any art.
Oh no.
Yeah. And she was like, oh my gosh. She's like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, I'm trust me, if I could do art, I would not be hiding that fact or anything. And come to find out, she was thinking of somebody else, and I think like that person's name was John, but he was also somebody. She said like I look very much like him in terms of just how I look in the face, and she knew that I was a tall, bald guy as well too. And she was just like, I sincerely thought you were this other guy that I knew. I was like, that makes a lot of sense now. But it was just funny. Like the more we talked to her about art and everything, and she kept saying that my artwork is great. I was just like, okay, this is getting really odd. Like, I don't know what is going on here, if I'm being trolled or what, but
that's hilarious.
Yeah, but I loved it. And we gave her a hard time. And again, like she's a fantastic person. She took it with, a lot of heart and everything like that. And we had said, that just made us laugh more than anything else. And absolutely loved that. So yeah, that's gotta be my favorite screw up on the show.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Mike, what about you? Come on. What's your favorite outtake?
I'm as soon as you said favorite one, I immediately went back to our Chris Condon interview.
Oh yes,
you
read my mind.
I've been doing. I think I jumped on here. When show like 65, show 75, or something like that.
52.
52. Thanks.
Yep.
And we've done Jim Valentino, Eric Lars, all these guys. And so we set up the Chris Condon interview, that Texas Blood. It's a dope book. And Matt texts me through Slack and says, hey, take the last question. I'm like, oh, shit. I don't have any, all my notes. We've already checked through stuff. He's already answered through stuff. So I'm going, I'll ask. And I don't know why I came up with this. But at the time, it was still in the first arc. And he was
I think the first arc had just wrapped.
Yeah, and I can't remember the sheriff's name, but he was the
Joe Bob. Sheriff Joe Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great character. I was like, oh, he's great. And I was like, hey, what if I can bring him on, if I can get him a question, say, hey, maybe you'll do something extra with the character, write an OGN. What's Sheriff Bob gonna get? And I asked I can't remember the form of it, but Chris Condon just looked. I mean, the whole show just stopped. It was like that part in Revenge of the Nerds where they light the weed at the Lambda and Omega Mu party and the record scratches and everything. And I'm going, oh, shit, this is
that Texas Blood is a Joe Bob solo book.
Right. And I'm sitting here, and I don't know why that came to mind. Matt's looking at me like I got lobsters coming out of my ears. Chris Condon's looking at me like I'm just some doofus with lobsters coming out of my ears. I'm mortified, praying to God these next minutes just go by. And afterwards, I'm just like, fuck, dude. And then Matt being Matt, oh, he barely noticed. I'm going, man, if you'd I'm just, and even to this day, like when I'm, you're researching or you're getting notes and stuff like that, I'm just going, okay, the great Condon incident of 21. Don't repeat it. Don't repeat that. Because it was, and the thing is, I mean, I don't think that's ever happened before on that where we couldn't rebound or it was just something that stopped the show like right in its tracks.
I mean, at least you didn't piss Mark Waid off.
Well, Mark, you going to do Mark Waid or the Richard Starkey story?
I am going to talk about the Mark Waid because Mark told us at the start he had 45 minutes. He had another show to get to, and like we're getting right there to about 42, 43 minutes, and I just can't stop fanboying. I'm like, here goes the Flash. I love you, man. And I mean, I am just like, my brain and my mouth are just utterly disengaged, and he's just kind of taking it in good humor. And yeah. And the clock is just going, and it's 47 minutes, and it's 48 minutes. And I think he was so kind to not just drop out.
Yeah. Right.
Of the conversation and say, fuck these nerds. And
he's very patient soul.
But yeah. I was like, oh, I'm never going to like, how often do you get to talk to one of your idols? Like the perks of this gig are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, I can say I got to hang out with Eric Larson while he was drawing pages of Savage Dragon one day. And that's awesome. And you just every now and again you get caught up in it, and that was my getting caught up in it.
Right.
And Yeah, like the second we stopped recording, he was gone. Didn't say bye, kiss my ass, thanks for the good time, nothing. I was like, oh, God.
Yep.
Bye.
I fired myself.
You know, it's funny you bring up Mark Waid because I'm going to the Memphis Comic Expo and
Ooh,
he's
nice.
going to be there.
Ooh.
And if
Tell him
anyone,
Matt said hi.
He won't remember me.
I will do that. I'm like, you remember this guy?
Picture of me like,
Yeah.
Get out of the convention.
Yeah. But you know, he wrote the story where that famous Matt Murdock image that came out where he's wearing the sweater that says "I'm not Daredevil."
yeah.
So I bought an "I'm not Daredevil" sweater, the red sunglasses, and the candy cane, and I got issue number 7 where that photo's from, and I'm hoping to get him signed it. I'm hoping to get him to sign it while wearing that stuff. So yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Like, I'm just smack dab in the middle of nothing for cons because I'm in Oklahoma City.
Oh yeah,
and the closest thing for us is Dallas. In terms
really?
of a big con.
Yeah, I was just there actually this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's still a little over 3-hour drive, though.
I was about to say, yeah.
I mean, I've done it. I've driven to Dallas plenty of times in my life, but it's just, you know, getting those better cons here is still a thing that's happening. But
right,
you know, it will. We got an NBA team, so we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, there you go.
So, woo! So, Sean, if someone wanted to listen to the Captioned Life, fresh, live, unedited, unencumbered by the constraints of society, what time and what day would they tune in?
Well, so unfortunately, right now I don't do it live.
Okay.
Just because we actually I tried doing that when it was me and Kevin, and the problem that I ran into is that it is a lot of hard work for me to try to do all that on the back end and host and interview people because
you have actual production value.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things where I actually have, while I'm interviewing the person in Zoom, I do have a couple other things going on in the background to kind of help me with the editing process. So like when something happens that I know I need to cut something out or something like that, I have to go and mark it while it's live. Otherwise, you know, I'm going to take forever to try to scrub through it. But I tried doing that with Twitch, and we did that a couple of times. And the issues we ran into is that it was very laggy for whatever reason, and it was hit or miss. It wasn't consistent at all. But I just couldn't run everything and do like all the, you know, switches and run everything on the back end to be able to do that. So hopefully if we get big enough to where like we could get somebody to run that on the back end, like maybe we can go live and do that a little bit more consistently. But right now the show isn't live. But if they want to listen to it or watch, I mean, we're on all the major podcasts. I will say that the YouTube video typically isn't edited a whole lot. It does have some production value to it, but I don't really spend a whole lot of time cutting in the middle stuff out of the video just because that takes a lot of time to kind of find and figure out like how to do that and everything. So usually if people want an unedited version, for the most part, the video is probably what they're going to get. And the podcast is a little bit cleaner and a little bit tighter than the YouTube video as well. But,
I got you.
Yeah, so right now it's not live, but hopefully down in the future we can do something live and have a little bit more of a real-time engagement with listeners and everything. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like right now we got Chad. He's in the comments, but you know, it's Chad. We talk to him every day. The funniest thing with going live that's ever happened, we had Tim Sheridan on. And this was right after Future State, and he wrote those 2 issues of Teen Titans Future State, right? Where in the future, Beast Boy and Raven were an item. And there is apparently an incredibly vocal subset of fans that hate it. And through the whole show, we're just getting bombarded with
really
hashtags justice for Raven and all of this just nonsense. And I'm like, what? And I like at first I didn't know what to make of it because again, it's never happened to us before. But like pretty soon I'm looking at this, I'm like, I think these people are like 13. I'm not going to respond to any of this nonsense. And so, yeah, we kind of, as we're rounding out the conversation, I'm like, Tim, I got to ask you about this Justice for Raven thing. And he just busts up laughing. It's like, I don't understand it. But there are some really passionate Raven fans out there. And power to them.
Right.
So, yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So, well, the Captioned Life, you heard it here. It's maybe not first, probably not first, definitely not first, but it's weekly and it's now part of the Comic Watch family. So welcome, Captioned Life, Sean, and occasionally Kevin. Woo!
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, we are so thrilled to have you under our aegis, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So,
big word.
It's only 2 syllables, but it is. Let's pivot a little bit while the three of us are here. Sean, in episodes past, we've maybe talked up reviews of the week's books or just current events. When we didn't have a guest or anything, we had a nice little theme. And I think this week, though, I really want to unpack this negative backlash yet again of fanboys online who are angry about She-Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, tell the kids at home what's going on with all this mishigas.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that folks tend to forget where Spider-Man stops and their reality kind of begins. I mean, there's some things you could ping on, with She-Hulk, but at the same time, all these review bombs. I mean, it's basic BS that is always kind of at the heart of the whole troll. I mean, trolling in the basic sense is nothing wrong because really all it is just poking a little fun, but you got to know when to stop, And if you're sitting here just being like a huge bully, just misogynistic and kind of not even offering any type of actual dialogue of what you don't like about the show, you're just being an asshole, pardon my French. Because I mean, overall, the show isn't bad. It's super fun.
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is like, and it's not even a thing, I guess, but I mean, the pacing, it's everything kind of so far in these first 3 episodes seems kind of packed in. Maybe I just slow down the episodes, but everything else, it's super fun. It's fun just like the comics. It's literally who Jennifer Walters is, and I think they're really capturing the aura of the character fairly perfectly.
I agree with that. I agree.
They even got the wall that Byrne brought in. So I mean, they got some nods, to the comics, but what I love again is the fact that they took the source material and they're not going panel by panel, but at the same time they're having fun with it. They swapped their origin, and it's just kind of they're having fun with it, and why not have fun with it? I mean, after all, she's fictional character. She's a fictional character. She's not coming to life. She doesn't exist, and it just drives me crazy at that when the comments go too far. And it's like I said, you have this. They have this jaded sense of reality that they're owed something. They're not owed anything. Even before the House of Mouse took over, little Billy will quit comics before Spider-Man isn't going to be a thing anymore. There's and it's kind of assy to say that, but it's the truth. It's the truth, and I just think, I think this is just a classic example of kind of just hiding what you really want to say. There's nothing wrong with the character. There's nothing wrong with the show. There's something wrong with you and how you approach.
Well, like there's been this like just nasty vibe ever since those first images came out of
horrible.
The pinks and the purples and now we've had last week's episode with twerking with Megan Thee Stallion. And people are just losing their freaking mind over this. And there's this nasty, and it's not even an undercurrent, it's an overcurrent of sexism that's going on. And I just, it curdles my blood every time I hear it. Sean, jump in, man. Like, what's your read on this whole situation?
It's really fascinating because when I go on TikTok and see the discourse that's been happening and everything, my biggest takeaway of what's happening is that they're going to hate it no matter what. That is just how they are. That's how they're wired. They've already made up their mind about stuff. What I find fascinating is that they talk about how terrible it is and they don't watch anymore, but somehow they still watch it and they still like it. It's not that they hate it, but they love to hate it, and I think that's the main difference with what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I think Marvel pretty much hit on the head and knew this was going to come out when they released She-Hulk with all the sexism was coming out. They pretty much been addressing it in each episode in some form or fashion. I got to say, the whole twerking scene, I did not expect that to be the biggest backlash, but at the same time, I think that just validates how they're just looking for anything to hate, because it used to be that, they're tearing up the character or they're not being true to the comics or whatever, which again, we've all said that's actually not the case. They've been pretty, I hate to use the term comic accurate when I'm describing media, because with the long history of comics, there's not one thing that's like most accurate. It's just interpretation for most part. But from everything that I've heard people have said about She-Hulk, because I actually haven't read a whole lot of She-Hulk at all, they have said that this is really, really true to the comics.
Absolutely.
And so the twerking scene is like, it has nothing to do with the comic character at all, but they all, went and bashed on it and hated it and everything like that. So that just solidified to me that they're just looking to hate anything at this point.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just, it's not going to go away. I think there's a lot of double standards that's being played, that a lot of people have made, good points about. Like, for example, when they're talking about the twerking scene, somebody I follow on TikTok had made a video saying that everyone's complaining about this, but they never complained about Iron Man 2 when they had all the cheerleaders with the iron suits and everything, pretty much doing that or worse in terms of, because at least She-Hulk was wearing a full suit. Like, you have a whole group of women that's in skimpy outfits and everything like that. Like, no one was complaining about that and how, young girls are impressionable and everything like that. So it's just, I think it's just going to be something that's going to be a fact of life, but at the same time, they're also being, very loud. So I think we need to, make sure that we're just as loud as them. And because I think we tried to ignore it for a long time, and I don't think it's working anymore, because it seems like there's a lot of creators that just have a lot of like huge following. And I think that's, it's one thing if someone's being loud about it. It's another thing where they have like so many subscribers that it's a little bit concerning about what kind of message that might be going out there that is left unchecked, basically. So
absolutely. And we know that these toxic fans are in truth the minority, but they're louder. And
right.
I love the way you phrase that. Like, we've got to be just as loud, but we've got to not only be just as loud, we need to be louder than them.
Right.
Because people make the mistake of thinking that the loudest person in the room, or the loudest voices in the room, I guess is more accurate, represent a majority because they're the loudest. And
right.
it's just not true.
Right.
So, and I mean, I don't want to deviate too far into politics, but, and Mike, I think you know where I'm about to go with this. But we see this playing out in the real world, in politics right now, every day for the last 7 years.
That's a been that long.
Like, I just aged phenomenally thinking about that. But it's true. And we know the nature of the internet is to be an echo chamber. And so all of this negativity, all of the Snyder Cut bros and the bigots and racists and sexists and anti-trans, whatever, are always finding new ways to amplify their nonsense,
Right.
Oh, we can't be on Twitter anymore? That's fine. We'll go to Mike, what's that one? Not Truth Social, the other one.
Oh, the other is that even still around?
Yeah,
4chan?
No, well, yes, but no. 4chan, 8chan. It's driving me nuts. The one that all the Proud Boys went to. Oh, this is gonna bug me. But anyway, that one. See, Mike, I know you're in some of the tip of your tongue. And there's always somebody else that what?
Parlor.
That was it. There's always somebody that's going to be willing to monetize nastiness, and it's unfortunate, and that's why we have to be vigilant and shut it down when we hear it, and don't be afraid to stand up for what we believe in. Right? It just is what it is. Now, to me, the twerking gag was a frivolous little joke that just didn't land with me. I just didn't find it funny, right? I felt like, from a narrative perspective, that whole subplot that took up like half the episode was basically designed to have Megan Thee Stallion guest star. It is what it is. I think that's a narratively weak choice, but I'm not gonna say I hate the show and it's so woke and all the time because of that. It's just not the choice I would make. Now, compare that to, like you said, the Iron Man cheerleaders, or hey, drunk Tony Stark pissing in his suit, or a lot of other things. The Hulk's bare ass in Thor Ragnarok, that again you didn't hear a peep about.
Right.
And it's like, amazingly, the double standard is just it's not just there; it's glaringly obviously there.
Right.
Well,
so.
The great thing was, I think in episode 1, where she broke down the difference when Bruce called her, oh, you handled your stress so well, and then she broke down, well, as a woman, and then she let it out, and you could feel the manufactured discourse.
Oh, yeah.
The internet was already on fire. I'm surprised Al Gore didn't shut it down. But, and it was funny. It was actually, it's disgusting in a sense, you know what I'm saying? And I think what's even more scary is, like Sean said, is that this stuff grows, it grows like a flipping weed in the backyard, man. And what I think the sad part is that you no longer are able to have fun with these fictional characters because it's a dance. Who gives a rat's ass for a dance, The thing is, if it wasn't a dance, or if it wasn't, it doesn't change the episode. It doesn't change the story. You know? It's I didn't, fall off the couch laughing. I chuckled. It was an okay joke. It's not Clerks 2, let's not get carried away, but it was still fun. But, when you say you're into something, and you're just not fun to talk to, you're not fun to be around when the subject comes up, are you really into it?
It's all you're going to do is bitch.
Right. You're not happy,
You're that fan, quote unquote, in Major League, who he's been at every game for 30 seasons. He's constantly trash talking.
Yeah.
And he swears up and down he's the biggest fan in the world, and all he does is complain. They're never going to be happy.
You sound like me talking about the Chicago teams.
Listen, man. If the shoe fits. No. You made your choice.
Painful one. A lot of painful choices.
That is true fandom, sir. But I mean, to me, like overall, quality-wise, She-Hulk is such a fun show.
It is. Yeah.
It really is. Like if you're finding these manufactured BS reasons to complain about, you just are you're not looking to enjoy it. You're looking to find something to complain about.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and I agree because when we're talking about the mid-credit scene with She-Hulk, all of them were just supposed to be just kind of funny thing. I think we can kind of spoil a little bit that we think that every mid-credit scene is supposed to be some sort of cliffhanger. And She-Hulk is just it's a comedy law show. And so it's this one, episode 3, it doesn't attribute to the storyline a whole lot, but neither did the one in episode 2. And I can't remember what the episode 1 was. But they didn't really attribute anything. It was just kind of like a funny.
Yeah, it's like it's a real stinger.
Yeah. It's just like some of the other ones that we've seen in the other movies as well too. But it's just one of the things that I'm really like about the She-Hulk series is just like what you said, it's a departure from what we've seen before. And I think talking about the MCU discourse is there is a lot of complaints about how everyone thought that it kind of runs the same formula, which to be fair, it does to a certain extent, but that's just movies in general, and especially action movies like that. I mean, there's a formula that goes with it that whenever you talk to a writer about how to write a story, there's always, the 3 or 5 act story that you have to have the climax and stuff like that. And that tends to be, how it goes. But in this phase 4, we've received a lot of different kinds of shows that I think just makes things a lot more interesting. Like, Moon Knight was a very different show than what we had before. WandaVision was just spectacular in what they did. And I think She-Hulk is
Shang-Chi.
Say what?
Shang-Chi.
Yeah, Shang-Chi.
Getting onto the film side, I mean, Multiverse of Madness is basically a soft horror movie.
Yes, and that was, it was very well done. It's very different. It's the first horror movie in the MCU that we've had, and it's very, very different than anything else we've had, And so She-Hulk as a series, I love because it is very different than what we've had before. And I think people, aren't really, know what to expect with it because it's so different. But what I love about the series is that it's fun, it's funny, and it's going to introduce just a lot of small characters, like obscure characters that we love in the comics. And it's giving us answers that we've been asking for in the MCU. So like, why did Bruce went back to his human self? And he gave us that answer. One thing that has always bugged me is how people just like, it's the huge celestial in the middle of the ocean hasn't been mentioned anywhere else in the MCU. And so now it's weird or whatever, which I thought was weird that people were hung up on that. But She-Hulk answered that question. I was like, there you go. Here's your little throwaway, So I think it's a lot of fun to have a comedy show, but also be able to have the freedom to do these kinds of things.
Well, yeah,
absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just saying again, what we're seeing with these shows is they're really having fun with the source material, and it's like, because, I don't want to say, people have been in comics for how long they've been in. But, these characters are so old that why not do something different, And for these cats that, that have been reading for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever. I mean, isn't it nice to see something different?
That's my go-to argument whenever somebody's complaining that, it's not like the comics. Good.
Yeah,
it's an adaptation.
Yeah.
You read the comics, dude.
Yeah.
Get something new.
Yeah,
That's one of the reasons. Excuse me. It's one of the reasons I have yet to ever rewatch the Sin City movie since it first came out, because it's so faithfully adapted from the comics. I don't need to see it again.
Right. Yeah.
I've read those comics to death, and I adore them, even though Frank Miller is gonna Frank Miller. They're such a fun read. I don't need to see a literal panel for panel reworking of them to film.
Right. A best example of this, I'm going to say Spider-Man, and I'm going to say that, first of all, I like Spider-Man as a character. I didn't grow up like really into him, but I was, generally aware of him because of pop culture and everything. But when we look at Spider-Man throughout cinematic history, we've had this is the third interpretation in the last 20 years of what Spider-Man is and everything. And so the first one with Tobey Maguire was the traditional, Peter Parker and Mary Jane. And then when we had Andrew Garfield, they were telling the Gwen Stacy side of things. And so when they were doing this one, it's like, you've kind of run the gamut in terms of how you could tell that story again. So I think the changes they made where no longer have we had Harry Osborn, but we have Ned as the best friend. And MJ is a little bit of a different take on it. I love that fact because it's not the same story again. And what I find fascinating is when we talk about how it has changed over the years, I'm actually, because on TikTok and for this other website that I work for, we're doing an article series where I go back and read like very, very old comics from the Marvel Unlimited app and the DC Infinite app. And I read not the first issue, not Amazing Fantasy number 15, but the first Amazing Spider-Man number 1 comic that came right after that. And what I found fascinating is that Peter Parker was made fun of in that issue for being a bookworm and being a nerd, right? But in the Tom Holland version, they went to Midtown, which was supposed to be like a STEM school. Everybody's a smarty pants. And he's not being bullied for being smart because everybody is smart there, but he's being bullied just because he's being bullied. So that's like a huge difference from if you're going to the source material from the first issue. Like that is a huge difference because with how, the times are right now, being a nerd or being a smarty pants isn't looked down like how it was in the 60s and everything.
Right.
So yeah, so I agree. It needs to adapt and it needs to change to be more reflective of our society because that's how comics were back in the day.
Well, and
Still
that's how these concepts remain evergreen.
Right.
People complaining about how Thor, for example, is depicted on page now versus in the 1960s are missing the point. If Thor were still depicted and written today like he were in the 1960s, nobody would be reading it. Nobody would care, and if the characters didn't grow and change and adapt to and be reflections of the times, then they would just go away.
Right.
They would become a fad of yesteryear, a curio to be collected and probably studied academically, but certainly not multimedia, multi-billion-dollar juggernauts that they are now.
Well, that, and I think it for me, it's more fun when a writer kind of takes a more bold approach, because again, we've read, seen the Spider-Man stories, the Batman stories, the Superman stories. We've seen it all. We've read it all. We get it, but again, even with comics, why should I keep reading Spider-Man? The new writer. So, Dan Slott's going to tell something different than Jason Aaron and et cetera, whatever. But it's these writers that have that kind of that uncanny ability to kind of want to take that bold approach to tell a different story. And whether it's a comic or a screenplay, that should be celebrated,
Right.
Like I'm not a fan of the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes, but he was bold enough to revamp it, and especially with that trash that was part 2, he was still bold enough to take an icon and tweak it and make it his own.
Right.
Some people liked it, some people did. It missed with me, and that's fine. But I'm not going to sit here and shame the people that love, because I love his original stuff, just don't like his Halloween remakes. But again, he was bold enough to tell a different story about an icon. And to me, I think that will always, I think that'll tell that better story instead of just constantly.
Absolutely.
Because as it is right now, you see it in comics and you see it in Hollywood. It's just a constant regurgitation, of the same stuff. Why do we need to keep buying it?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
While you're saying that, it makes me, well, now I just lost my thought, so never mind.
It makes you something.
Yeah. It makes me feel something.
It makes you forget.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Never mind.
I remember now. Actually, I remember now. And I think part of the part of the thing that we're facing right now in the comics industry and comics fandom and stuff like that is the comics are being treated like the Bible for some of them in
Yep.
terms of, there's only that select versions that they want to pick and choose from. They think that, this is how the character should always be, that it should be untouched. And I think that's been part of the issue here is that they're not willing to let the character change and adapt to where we're at now, because just like what we've been saying, it's if you're just going to share the same story over and over again, then it gets uninteresting at some point, and I think going back to what Stan Lee has said when he said, when people ask him who would win in a fight between this person, he always said it's whoever the writer wants to win at that point. And I think he would also say that goes beyond just who would win in a fight, but just what would happen with this character, because he recognized that it needs to adapt, that it needs to be fun for everybody involved, and that they need to have that freedom to be able to be bold with the characters, like what Mike was saying with Rob Zombie and the Halloween movies, that they need to try to tell a different story. And that's why we have all these different universes, and that's why we have, even like some of these reboots and events where they kind of start things over again. It sometimes it's necessary to do that to be able to tell new stories at that point. And I think, if we just kept everything, sacred, that can't be touched in some form of capacity, then I think that's when we start seeing a loss of the value for comics and the stories that they're telling.
Yeah, very well said. So basically, haters, just get over it.
Yeah,
because you're in the minority, and just because you're loud doesn't mean you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. Very
so
true.
It goes. So it goes. So, well, I think that wraps our show for the week. Sean, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thanks for having me on.
Conversation. Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again sometime. I liked crossing over. It was good. We crossed the streams, and we didn't blow up New York. So
you never crossed the streams.
Well, but sincerely, you're doing great work on the Captioned Life podcast. It's a really cool show. Y'all should all check it out, especially, not only because it's part of the Comic Watch family now. And, like I said, we're just really, really excited to have you here, bud.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be part of this.
Yeah. So, looking ahead next week, we are looking at artist Sean Isaacs is going to drop by and talk about Thunderbolts, talk about Fantastic Four life story, talk about whatever the heck else we can pull out of him. So be here 7:30 Central, 8:30 East Coast. Yeah, we'll
time zone that matters.
Stupid time zones. That's all I have to say about this. And I say it every time. But thank you all very much for listening. The world is occasionally a crappy place, but it doesn't have to be. Get out there, read something cool, support your local comic book shop, and above all, be good to each other. Thank you so much.